Keith, thanks so much for joining me this afternoon. I know you're a bit crazy right now getting ready for the show.
It is a busy time, but it's always good to see you, Kevin. We're really looking forward to Nashville.
And, we've had several conversations over the past 2 years, obviously by Zoom. The first one probably around 2 years ago, and it was certainly, I don't want to talk about it anymore, but I think we still need to talk a little bit about it. I know that must have been a surreal experience for you. I mean, just as districts were shutting down, you were making executive decisions about whether or not to have in-person events. It was an existential crisis, right?
It was a crazy week ending in Friday the 13th, where on that previous, a week before, we were at 105% of capacity at the hotel. On Monday, it dropped to 90%. So we surveyed our attendees, and by the next day it had dropped to 65% as the pandemic became so clear. So I think we were kind of the first out of the gate in terms of and we were very careful to say we were not canceling, but we were postponing and going virtual, which we did that May, which went fine. It was a Zoom experience. We got better at it last year with a much more robust virtual platform. And I think this year, what we're seeing is really a hybrid event. Most of the people will be in Nashville. And I think going forward in the future, we see that there were a lot of people who never could travel as part of the team. And so we're going to intentionally, we're not going to virtualize the whole entire experience in Nashville and going forward, but certain elements of it will be the keynotes, the spotlights, and there will be certain content that will only be available virtually and will be available to both the on-site attendees and those that are all virtual. So when I say that, there's like 40 or 50 sessions that are either pre-recorded or virtually available, which the people in Nashville will also get.
It really seems like I've done a number of conversations talking about professional development, not only for educators, but for administrators and for people in the space and in other industries. And maybe this pivot that you had to make, that kind of emergency pivot, really has led to some new innovations to really use this technology in a new way, right?
I think that's right. And we realized that a lot of the ways we were working with companies was often only at face-to-face events. And so, a lot of companies don't like the virtual, but we found that there are ones that actually work. So we're certainly going to have always a face-to-face annual meeting. That's the signature event, but we're also going to do a mix throughout the year and really think of, which we always have, not just a one-time trade show, but really how do we have a conversation all throughout the year? And that's, I think, the new way to do it. And for companies that want to participate with CoSN, getting engaged, being part of the online community, getting part of our leadership initiatives, whether it's on digital equity or privacy or cybersecurity, those are critical to our audience, and really co-creating content, I think, is the new norm for what our educators are really looking for.
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of those topics now. And I know obviously COVID is still kind of, wrapped around everything that we talk about, but as hopefully that goes into the distance, where do you see the kind of the major themes that are cropping up for CoSN 2022?
Yeah, well, there's the theme for the conference, and then I'll talk about some of the subject things that go on all year. The theme for the conference is called Amplifying the Power of One, and we're really looking at how some individuals have really made a difference, particularly during the pandemic. And so the opening keynote will have three kind of stories highlighting individuals. So we have a CTO from Arlington County Public Schools who's really been working on digital equity and closing the homework gap. Superintendent Hinojosa, Michael Hinojosa from Dallas ISD, who certainly has had a big impact in his district, but also statewide, thinking about the equity issues during the pandemic, and kind of filling it out with Jessica Rosenwurzel, the chair of the Federal Communications Commission, who really branded the term homework gap. And but we're going to be looking not just at a standard kind of story about what you're doing, but how has their life journey kind of made a difference. And we'll be expanding that to a lot of conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, I think we've never had a conference where we've spent more time thinking about that from a whole variety of perspectives, getting people to share what their journey has been, everything from networking events to, we're going to be taking our leadership, our board, our chapter leaders to the African American Music Museum, a new museum in Nashville.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
And you know, when you ask me what the big topics are, there's no question we'll be releasing our new survey, and the last 4 years has been cybersecurity as the #1 concern of our audience. I don't think it'll be a surprise that it is again this coming year, but we'll have a lot of new data. And related to that is this issue of digital equity and the concerns around that. We're seeing lots of growing interest around topics like interoperability, the fact that data is too siloed. We're really getting much more powerful around how we use data to individualize learning.
One of the things that I've picked up on, and maybe it's more political than necessarily technology focused, but is the idea of the funding, you know, the America Cares Act, and the number of different initiatives to get monies to districts in order to solve some of the digital equity issues that we've always talked about for years, right? In kind of this conceptual sense. And then March of 2020 happened, and it was the reality was put up in front of everyone. How much have you seen a difference in the industry behavior when it comes to working with districts? I mean, it was amazing that spring. The reaction, that immediate reaction where all curriculum was free. Even the big bad telcos were like, let's get everybody Wi-Fi and try to get everyone up. Now, it wasn't a perfect solution, and there's still lots of problems, obviously. But do you think that that sort of attitude can remain going forward and help improve this?
I do think that what I would say the imperative or the timeline, you know, these 4 or 5 year plans to become one-to-one went out the window, and overnight school systems went, and all of our data. I was just before this podcast looking over some of the data we'll be releasing in March. The numbers have dramatically changed in terms of the kind of devices and the connectivity level that the most school districts have. So that will all be good news. The bad news is there's still a lot of kids that don't have it. And what we've had is temporary money. And a lot of that temporary money is going to expire in the next year or two. And what happens then? Is there really a sustainability plan for this work? You know, we wouldn't we wouldn't buy a bus if we didn't plan to maintain and replace it and insure it and have someone to staff it, to drive it. Well, we need to be that way in terms of technology. It can't just be a one-time emergency funding. We have to really get school boards and parents and the community to really understand that.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads me to my final question for you today. You know, we talked about 2 years ago. Let's look ahead 2 years, and hopefully as we go back to whatever our new normal is going in, and these fundings do come in, and we'll try to keep it glass half full, that, you know, things continue to progress. Where do you see the state of the industry in 2 to 3 years, as well as, you know, the state of CoSN?
Well, I never want to predict what exactly will happen, but I would rather be focused on how we invent the future we want. And I think that Winston Churchill had it right when he said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And so we've seen how quickly things can move. That doesn't mean they will move. And if we get stuck in a mindset, we want to go back to what it was in 2019, I think that's a big problem. The education, I don't think anyone in 2019 was saying that the education system in the United States was working for every kid. It wasn't. And so let's learn from what we've experienced. We've learned we have new ways to engage parents. We have different ways of a lot more teachers are using technology. We have a lot of kids that want to have more personalized learning. So how do we leverage those trends and not get stuck in trying to go back to something that wasn't perfect in the first place?
Yeah, yeah. Great insights there. Keith, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I really look forward to seeing you in person. Many years at CoSN, and I've always come away inspired and feeling much more smarter than I was walking in about the state of the industry. So hopefully we'll be back to normal in a couple of weeks.
Sounds great. See you in Music City.
All right.